Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 29 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank those of you who have written in and told me that you're listening, which I really appreciate, and also given me some suggestions for future podcasts, which is really terrific. A couple of you have suggested that I put together a list of some of my must-have or must-read books for photographers, and I plan on doing that for a future podcast. And a few of you have suggested some other things about looking at the way in which we look at tone or value or cropping choices or some other things relative to my photography or other photographers' work, and I'm planning on those things for a future podcast too. So keep those cards and letters coming. I'm really delighted to hear from you, and if you don't want to write to me directly, you can leave a comment on the cameraposition.com blog, or alternately, you can send me an email at jeff@jeffcurto.com. So today, for episode 29 here, I'd like to spend some time talking about a photographer who is probably unknown to most of you who are listening, unfortunately. A really interesting photographer, a terrific photographer actually, who is probably equally well known for his written work, a photographer and author, writer named Wright Morris. Morris was born in 1910 in Central City, Nebraska, and died in 1998. And that Nebraska heritage is actually what I'd like to talk about in this episode of Camera Position, and that idea of his heritage as something that lasted throughout his career in both his written work and his photographic work as a sort of consistent theme. And what I'm really interested in talking about in this episode of Camera Work is, where is it that our pictures come from? What is it that photographers do to connect up their work that they do with what else it is that they're interested in? And I find that to be one of the most interesting things about the medium. Certainly, let's look briefly at Ansel Adams, a photographer whose fascination with the American West, with the natural landscape, specifically a fascination with the wonder and majesty of the American landscape, dominated his vision for a long period of time, from the 1920s through his death in 1984. So here is another photographer, Wright Morris, whose birthplace of Nebraska turns out for him to be a formative event. His memories of his childhood in Nebraska, his memories of the people that he knew, especially people of his own family, turn out to be a huge sort of wellspring of inspiration for the photographic work that Morris did. In books like his 1946 The Inhabitants, or The Home Place, published in 1948, Wright Morris also spent time talking about his ideas about his childhood in Nebraska and the memories of that experience. One of the things that Morris did as a photographer and a writer was attempt to create something that he called photo texts, which were a sort of combo of writing and photography, where the written word propped up the photographs and the photographs propped up the written word. And The Home Place and The Inhabitants are among those kinds of books. In addition to those types of books that he called photo texts, Morris also published a number of books of writing about photography in a more generalistic sort of way. And probably among the most notable of those is a book called Photographs and Words, published in 1991. If you can get your hands on a copy of that, he has an awful lot of really intriguing things to say about photography as a medium. But what's really fascinating to me about Wright Morris is the way in which he continuously, throughout his career, both as an author and as a photographer, mined that deep well of memories and ideas about his home place in Nebraska, about his childhood, about the people he knew there, their habits, the idea of the plain and simple life of a Nebraskan in the early part of the 20th century has a lot to do with what Morris's choice of subjects was. And the photographs that he made really bear that out. These are not complex pictures. They are not pictures that are sort of dependent upon weather or mood. In many ways, they are very much reportorial. They are photographs that have a very documentary kind of quality to them, as if Morris really just wants us to see what it is that he's talking about in the written word, or just to see the sort of beauty inherent in something as simple as a drawer full of silverware, or the sort of simple act of walking into a barn, or the sort of iconic view of the giant grain elevator standing out against the empty sky. And so, what I really want to think about here is this idea that in photography, or really, I think, in any creative activity, who we are consists in large measure of where we've come from, and what we believe, and what we think, and how we think about those things. So, the question that I've been asking myself for quite a long time, and continue to come up with a bigger and better answer, I hope, all the time, and a question I think that might be worth asking yourself in terms of your own creative endeavors in photography, or whatever else you find as a creative outlet in your life. Where is it coming from? What is it that is interesting to you? How do you decide what it is that you photograph? How is it that you decide what it is that you do with spare time that you have in your life? What is it that you are most interested in? And just as importantly, why? Where does that come from? Where does that inspiration, that idea come from in your past? And how can you turn those ideas that you have into visual images, into something that moves you as the photographer, and with some measure of luck, might move the viewer of that image as well. So keep thinking about what it is that you're trying to say, and where does that thought come from. And I think the deeper that thought is, the more intriguing your work will become. The idea that we can't just go and try to find something that's inherently interesting to photograph. We have to kind of be committed, or at least sort of looking at that idea of where it is that we're interested in pursuing that medium of photography. Well, a couple of side notes here for any of you who might live in the western suburban Chicago area. I currently have an exhibition of my work on the walls of the Arrowhead Gallery at Waubonsee Community College in Sugar Grove, Illinois. And so if any of you are out that way, I would love to have you stop by and take a look. I'm also giving a gallery talk in the gallery on Tuesday, September 19th at 2 p.m. So again, anybody who is within the sound of my voice, or within the distance of the sound of my voice, it'd be fun to have some live people there. I'm hoping to have some good turnout for this presentation. And also, for those of you who have been following along with my other podcast, the History of Photography podcast, classes are back in session as of today, the 23rd of August, and this evening is my first History of Photography class for the semester. So anybody who's interested in picking that up at the very beginning, I'll be posting that podcast in a day or so. So thanks very much for listening. Thank you for those of you who have written in and told me about some alternate venues for camera position. I really appreciate those of you who have told others about camera position. That's a great thrill to know that you're interested enough in what we're doing here to let people know that it's something that's worthwhile listening to. And if you tell a friend, let me know. I'm really greatly appreciative of those kinds of things. So thanks for listening, and go out there and mine that wellspring. Think about where it is that you've come from, what it is that you're interested in, and where that's taking you as a photographer. Go out and make some photographs, and thanks again for listening to Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.